crime of the century.
Worth more than their weight in gold, the key to a computer's brain and to a new crime wave. Today's criminal currency, silicon chips. I'm Jane Frankie, exposing a black market that's costing us millions of pounds.
It is the crime of the century. I reckon you could make $1 million within a week.
Terrified, panic-stricken. I really thought my life was in great danger. And I thought, well, my life's more important than circuit boards.
I'm convinced this is going to be the fastest growing crime in Scotland in 1996.
Criminals and the black market move with the times. Indeed, most experts agree they move faster, recognize trends more quickly than legitimate business does. In the technological revolution we're living in, the computer business is one of the fastest growing and most lucrative, and criminals are keeping pace with it every step of the way. For high-tech business, read high-profit crime. And these are its source, memory chips. A wafer-thin 2.5 inches of pure profit to a black market that's creating its own underworld, Silicon Glen. To many of us, it's a mystery world, the inside of a computer. Those in the know can tell you that most of what you're seeing is worthless. But one or two components in these miniature corridors of techno brainpower are anything but.
That's a motherboard assembly from a computer. That's the kind of tray of parts you find inside a computer. And there's two real items of interest that it holds in terms of the current discussion. One is the chip or processor, which is that kind of thing. That one's got a heat sink on to take the heat, but that's basically what we're talking about. The other is this key in the piece here, which is a SIM or memory module. That can be assembled in and out of the board quite easily. That's worth about £40 per megabyte, and therefore up to maybe £320 for a single piece like that.
And there's no problem finding a market for that single piece. In chip currency, the megabyte is an indication of power and value. The higher the number of megs, the more it can do, the more it's worth. For megabyte, read megabait, with no questions asked.
I just want to get rid of them pretty quickly, and I don't really want to get involved in too much paperwork. 13. 13 for 10, 16. Cash. No paperwork. Yeah? How much? £100. For a 16 meg? Said I was going to sell 10 of them. I've got another 5. I've got some 8 megs as well.
But bring back say a couple of 8s and another 3 16s.
2 8s, 3 16s?
Yeah. We'll buy say 50 for the 8s and 100 for the 16s.
Just cash. Right, okay.
Cash only, no paperwork. It would have been a profitable morning at just one of the hundreds of computer fairs around the country. Such is the demand to increase computers' capabilities that the black market in components has flourished. Police and the industry have tried to tackle it, but the chips were stacked against them when the stakes rose sharply, suddenly, after events thousands of miles away. Last year's earthquake at Kobe in Japan. For shockwaves around the Pacific Rim, read crime wave around the world. Factories producing silicon chips were badly damaged. Suddenly, computer memory became an even more precious commodity. The already active black market moved swiftly.
We first saw it in Silicon Valley in the US, which is where most of these things start.
because that's where the most computers are. But it spread so rapidly around the world that I don't think it's easy to trace how it spread. It was probably only a matter of weeks. And we certainly saw an example in Glasgow very shortly after the first reports were coming from Silicon Valley.
Silicon Glen's success is just as tempting for criminals as its American counterpart. Scotland produces 1 in 3 computers bought in Europe, 1 in 10 worldwide. The industry here earns more than £7,000 million a year. In more ways than one, the business is mega, so have the thefts been. IBM lost a reported £2.3 million worth in a raid on a plant in Greenock. Compaq were hit in a £700,000 raid, masterminded, it's claimed, by a gang from Spain.
Now, not only are we dealing with things that are as valuable as a diamond ring, but we're dealing with millions of them. So we have a management process we have to put in place that recognizes these things are very small, very valuable, but are going through our factories, going through our various lines of communication in enormous quantities. Now, that requires cooperation between the different entities in Scotland, and it also requires that we make sure that the different practices we have all fit together.
Got 6 computers in 2 minutes. Now, even in the most heavily policed areas, if you're going to get in and out in 2 minutes, you're fine. And it's not like you've got to load up a van or have a chain of men carrying heavy equipment out to a car. These things fit in your pockets and you'll meet up at the pub half an hour later.
A company in Glasgow lost more than £100,000 worth of SIMs, and the violence wasn't limited to smashing in windows.
The front doorbell rang, and I checked the door through the spy hole, and there was a guy standing with a box and also a white transit van pack. Said he had a delivery. So I opened the door to take the delivery in. And as I opened the door, there was 2 standing on the wall at the side here with masks. They piled in on top of me along with the one with the box, and we sort of struggled in the area here.
They actually attacked you?
Yeah, physically attacked me.
They dragged you through here?
Dragged me through here.
What then happened?
They held me down in a pallet roughly where we're standing at the moment, face down on my knees with a knife at my throat.
Then what happened?
I could hear trays being thrown around, plastic trays similar to these, out in the main factory.
You couldn't see anything?
I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it. My first impression was that they were just in to sort of mess the place up. But it was only after this happened and it was all by that I realised what they were after.
What were they after? What were you told?
Well, I found out later it was a SIMs they were after, which was part of the motherboards that was on the tray. And this is obviously what they were doing, taking the SIM out of the motherboard and just throwing the rest on the floor.
Did you know what a SIM was?
I hadn't a clue. I never even heard the name before until the police told me after it was all passed.
That's a SIM?
Yeah, I know now that's a SIM, yeah. That's what they were after. I was astounded that something so small could be worth so much. And they put in so much effort to get it.
They probably didn't have to put much effort into selling them on. 2 men told us they paid £500 for 100 SIMs to the person who stole them. 1 phone call to London, and they were paid £10,000 in a handover at the airport the next morning.
It is a crime of the century. And at the end of the day, they've got loose money, but nobody gets hurt at the end of the day. It is worth millions. You know, I reckon you could make £1 million within a week if you've done it right. That's on a higher scale than what I'll ever dream of. But you could do it, no problem. I mean, the folk that we were selling the chips to, they're just jumping from one airport to another airport to another airport. They could go on that for a weekend, make 200,000 or 300,000.
My partner here got offered them. Somebody was selling them on, offered for £500.
How many chips?
100 chips. And they were easy to obtain at the time. We actually done it. And as you see, I just went on, phoned up a paper from there, knowing that it'd be worth something, but at that time I didn't know much it was worth. And when I actually got handed the money, I thought I'd won the national lottery.
The raids forced major manufacturers to tighten up security. But much of it was designed to keep thieves out of their factories. According to Rab and Joe, who both used to work in a computer plant, the security hasn't stopped theft from the inside. It is, they say, a way of life.
You can't always stop it. If something's very small and can be put in a pocket or something of that sort, unless you start searching people, unless you start going through the sort of controls we have in airports. And I don't think today, in the world of employment, that's something that would be acceptable.
Some companies have gone down that path, though, haven't they?
Well, some may do, and if these microprocessors became worth many, many thousands of pounds, like banknotes might be, it may well be. But today, that's not something we would tend to do. What we would tend to do is to improve the management of the inventories that are moving through our plants.
It's not a case how easy is it. It's just, you just take them. I mean, it's too easy to explain to and you could just pick them up, you know, just walking at the factory night time. And that's you £500 richer. So, I mean, if you're working there for £500 a month and you've got the chance of just walking out that door, it's not even got to cross your mind how easy, how hard it is. You're going to do it. So obviously you've got to do it.
We were under the impression that manufacturers had really tightened up on their security.
No, that's not the case. And it never will be the case, because it starts at the top and it just works its way into the bottom. Everybody's helping themselves.
The security clampdown at Silicon Glen may have gone some way to reducing theft there, but the criminals have moved elsewhere, to offices, companies, colleges, universities, anywhere, in fact, that uses computers. It's been known for an entire office block to be stripped bare of its memory chips overnight. The thieves, with their lightweight, precious cargo, long gone by the time the theft is discovered. And it's made so easy for them. While companies carefully lock up their petty cash in safes overnight, they leave thousands of pounds lying on the desks. Think about it. Would it be safe to leave a purse with your money in it on your desk overnight? No? Then your computer isn't safe either.
In 1996, I think we're going to have the biggest year for chip theft in the history of Britain, and particularly in Scotland, because it is a much newer crime here. We've only really seen it in the last 2 or 3 years. And while there have been some fairly spectacular hauls from the manufacturers, I think in 1996, we're going to start seeing for the first time the really intense concentration on small businesses, small firms, and small offices, because they're the easiest to break into and the most profitable for the thieves.
Last week, Reed Care College in Paisley was cleaned out of chips, £50,000 worth. British Telecom in Edinburgh was broken into, the value of the haul, £10,000. Same night, same city, Standard Life, 30,000. 3 weeks ago, Annie's Land College in Glasgow, 35,000.
We've been very fortunate, and here I'm touching wood like mad. We've been very fortunate in the past that we have not been hit very badly. Now, that doesn't make us complacent at all. We're very careful about security measures, and we're very careful about cooperation with the police, and we're very careful to make sure that we keep our security measures up to date. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you what they are, because that would be a breach of security in itself.
But touching wood wasn't enough. Hours after this interview, Glasgow University was hit, losing several computers and vital research. On the face of it, the litany of break-ins points to a new crime wave. And although the police say it's not out of control, it seems raiders have turned their attention to computer users since the tightening of security at computer makers.
There's a risk of that because the computer components are always desirable and may always be stolen elsewhere. I don't think it's happened directly because we're not experiencing the thefts from office blocks and users of computers in the same areas. The majority of the problem with theft from office blocks is 400 or 500 miles away down in England.
Tell that to ICL in Edinburgh, a £15,000 raid in October.
As far as we've been able to establish, access to the building was gained in this corner Well, they appeared to have stuck their backs against this window and the feet against the wall and shimmied themselves up. They got up onto the roof and appeared to then have handled each other up on the shoulders until everybody of the team was in and had gained access through the roof.
They knew exactly what they wanted. They were in there, breaking the equipment open, taking out the memory chips and off. But at the end of the day, they could do the sort of damage they did and get the stuff out within about 30 minutes. But we don't know exactly how long they took.
That's not a bad return for 30 minutes work, is it?
No, I'd like to be in that business sometimes.
After they gained entry, they started to go around the machines and began to brutalise them, as can be seen with the state of this case and its front cover. Once into the machines, they started to tear the boards out, some of them which had the SIMs in these packages here. They've ripped them in such a way that they've broken the connectors, so it makes this board totally useless. Plus the metalwork at the beginning, which connects into the chassis itself, is no longer of any use. This PC has had so much damage done to it that we've deemed it not worth repairing.
The facts of the matter are that these memory chips are now more valuable than gold, worth more than their weight in gold. So you have to make sure that people think about the value of the chips and take proper precautions.
Oh, I see rich pickings, invariably. Whenever anyone starts talking about awareness, I always turn away because it's usually something I'm sick of hearing about. But this is a case where you can honestly say there is almost no awareness of the risk many businesses are taking every day. I walk past little firms that have set up with design consultancies, accountancies, places like that, and they've all gone very intensively into computers as a way to save money and save labor. And they haven't done anything for security that would keep an even half-interested RAM raider out, or even someone with a way with locks. You can see in these companies, just by looking in the window, 20, 30,000 pounds worth of chips sitting there waiting to be taken.
And waiting to be snapped up by any number of buyers. Dealers interested only in a bite of the megabyte cherry, not in where it came from. It's too easy, we were told, so Frontline put it to the test with a hidden camera at the Barras in Glasgow. We offered chips at remarkably low prices, cash only.
You buy stuff as well. I got some SIM chips I'm trying to get rid of. No way around it at night.
The only way that we would buy them is if you had a chat with a boss and you actually had proof where they came from.
Okay.
You just got to watch where they come from.
Oh, yeah.
And as far as we know, it could have fell off the back of your truck somewhere.
No deal here, a different story elsewhere.
What was you selling them? What did you say? Sims. Yeah. What size? 16 meg. What's the each? What? How much are those each? Ooh, well, I got about 11 of them. I want to get rid of them. They're, what? What's that, sort of 900 quid, something like that for the lot? I don't know, close to my living. You buy them or what? Yeah. You're into it? Yeah. Goes without saying, I'm a bit allergic to checks. What? A bit allergic to checks. And
oh no, it's cash. Cash. Cash.
No paperwork, no. I wouldn't have to worry about any sort of signing anything on that.
Say what? What was the question?
Paperwork and shit.
What paperwork?
You're still in CDs, you wouldn't be interested in any SIMs if I had some?
Yeah.
Yeah?
What you got?
Got some 4 meg.
How many?
11.
You got them on you now?
I can go and get them.
I'd bring them to them.
That'd be cash, yeah?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'll take anything at all that you can get. Any hardware. Colour printers I could do with. You know, if you come across anything like that, but the price has got to be right.
Like 1 or 2, but
yeah, that's
couldn't
it.
be a regular supplier.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
An AO A1. An AO A1 printer is a sort of priority if you can find one. Well, it's quite exciting. It's just that we're not experienced enough in the market to exploit it, you know what I mean, to its potential.
Yeah. Is it a growing market?
Oh yeah, it's growing, yeah, without a doubt.
So I got a job with the future, eh?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Anything at all that you do get, anything at all, just give me the spec on it and what have you, and I'll shift it for you, get it out of your way.
Right.
You know, but obviously you're not dealing with anybody. You know, it's...
Yeah, that's what I want. You're not going to ask me any awkward questions about where I got them,
no, certainly not.
My business.
Sure business, of course.
It's an interesting market. I think most people in the electronics industry say there's no such thing as a black market in electronics components, but there's a grey market because all of the components are equally valuable, whatever source they've come from, and provided they're not damaged, they're all equally valid and can be used and interchanged. We are talking about replaceable, upgradable, interchangeable components. I suppose some of it goes through electronic shops in various places, some of it will go through specialist dealers or by mail order. You only have to take down the computer magazines from newsagents and see how many firms are offering computer components in how many different ways. And somewhere in amongst that lot, some very small proportion of stolen components will filter back into the market.
Others argue that it isn't some very small proportion. SIMs are replaceable, interchangeable, and impossible to tell apart. They have no unique markings. Manufacturers say they can't identify individual chips. So even if a thief is caught in possession, it's often difficult to prove the components are stolen.
In terms of tracking chips through the market, it's like trying to track a glass of water through the sewage system. There's nothing to distinguish that chip from every other chip. Even if you start marking it, you pour blue dye down into the sewage system, it's going to get mixed in with so many other products and so many other companies on its way to the final destination. And it may get sold on from then when somebody decides they've had enough of it. It's almost impossible to tell where it's going to come out.
There have been a couple of cases where that was a problem, particularly if the chips are removed any distance from the factory. But in most of the cases which I'm talking about, it's been a small recovery of property in the possession of someone who had no excuse or reason to have it, and the conviction has been quite straightforward.
Not so in the case of Rab and Joe. Police caught them after their £10,000 handover at the airport. They were tried for reset, acquitted when the prosecution couldn't prove the unmarked goods were stolen, let alone from where.
At the end of the day, to get things right about marking chips or whatever they have to do to identify these chips to see if they've been stolen, till they eventually get the stuff identified or individually marked, then I'll never get the people at the top or people like myself.
You don't think that the conviction rate could be higher?
No. There is always a difference between arrests and conviction rate through any process of justice. In most cases it's satisfactory, but that's one of the issues, going back to something you asked earlier, why we're keener on getting the property marked either by the user or by the manufacturer, and we're still working on that aspect.
That may be for the future, but there's a lot companies can do now. In Livingston, this firm found out the hard way the criminal value of their hardware, £20,000. Steel shutters now protect the business, and they've worked.
We hadn't heard a lot about computer theft or anything like that. You know, you expect your normal, break-ins and that type of thing, but we really weren't accustomed to the actual computer theft. I'm confident that we've taken probably 98% steps to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Matter of fact, recently it would appear that it was attempted another break-in, and they peeled the window film off again and actually saw our security shutters and moved on to other premises.
Small comfort to the other premises, of such concern to Lothian and Borders Police that they now advise firms on preventing computer crime.
So what we have here is, a unit in a typical industrial estate. I see you've got shutters internally,
right.
and they're down at night. That's very good. That, if someone's going to go to the bother of breaking a window, they're also going to have to consider that they're going to have to then get through shutters. Here we are.
Main office.
Yeah. Inside, this is you. Yeah. Right into the heart of your business. Yeah. And here we have just a typical modern open plan office with lots of equipment lying around that would have a resale value for any kind of thief.
Right.
If you lose some of this stuff, it can mean the difference between staying in business and staying out of business.
Right.
And, crime prevention is very standard. All we want to try and get across is that it's far better to prevent a crime than to know who did it.
Right.
We don't want you as a victim, and that's the standpoint that we would take. You can mark anything you want. It's not going to stop it from being stolen.
But most businesses remain blissfully unaware of the dangers of computer theft, despite it costing mega millions.
It's very difficult to quantify, but the Association of British Insurers this year are estimating that insurers are paying out in the region of £200 million from policies that cover losses, theft and consequential damage. But obviously there's a lot of damage that isn't included in that, and estimates are ranging anywhere up to £1 billion for losses to industry and commerce as general as a result of computer theft.
Surprising, perhaps, that such a growing crime in a country with such a huge computer industry merits only one police officer dedicated to dealing with what's being called the crime of the century.
One of the drawbacks in dealing with any kind of computer crime in Scotland is that there aren't the number of trained officers that an English force would have. Every police force in England and Wales has at least one trained computer officer who's in constant liaison with the computer crimes unit at Scotland Yard. For all of Scotland, there's one.
Is one of you enough? I mean, why are we sort of lagging behind, or apparently lagging behind?
We're not. We have as many officers, I'm sure, in Scotland dealing with the problem for the sake and for the size of the problem. But I don't think I'm playing it down, because I see a wide spectrum of crime and other social offences. And I don't worry disproportionately about this one. This is one of a number of problems which can be tackled very constructively by people who possess the goods and can look after them.
But those involved in the illegal possession of the goods see theirs as a crime with no victim. Do you have any conscience about what you did?
At the time, no. I suppose it's hurting somebody upstairs, but when you're down at the bottom and you've got a family to feed, and maybe you're on that sort of kind of wage, then no, I'm not that conscious, no.
Why do you say it's not crime, not really bad?
Because you're not hurting anybody. There's nobody at the end of the day getting hurt, apart from the employers. But that's the ones that you want your dig at.
But employers employ people. If the losses get too high, firms could close, jobs could be lost. This is not, say manufacturers and companies, a victimless crime.
It's like saying, well, if you claim off insurance, it doesn't matter because nobody pays. Of course they do. They pay insurance premiums. If big manufacturers are having more and more things stolen, then clearly they'll charge for them. I mean, it's all paid for somehow in the system. If that then becomes a real black market trade, everybody's affected by it. And affected by it in quite nasty ways, because things like burglaries and theft will become much more vicious than they are today. And this personal property we're talking about, it's fine to say it's pinched off some big office block, but if you're walking around, it's in your car, or it's in your home, or it's in your mobile phone, it can be pinched off you.
I've spoken to people who are lost or nearly lost medical records, research records. If you lose 5 years cancer research data from a computer that's carelessly stolen and doesn't come back, we're all victims.
Put like that, there could be victims in a life and death situation. Victims, too, of our own technological success, because the black market is going strong, growing stronger.
There's a lot of people that, as you say, step over the wrong side of the line. And with that kind of opportunity, with people offering you that kind of money, it's quite tempting to do.
Would you do it again?
Yes, I would.